This video is sponsored by the Ultimate Freelancing Bundle by StudyWebDevelopment.com, which gives you everything you need to start your own freelancing business, including a 130-page in-depth guide, invoicing and client proposal templates, website templates, an SEO checklist, and much more. Visit the link in the description and use the code BRAD25 to get 25% off. Hey, what's going on, guys? In this video, we're going to be building an application using Node.js and Express along with the Mailchimp API to create a newsletter sign-up form. And if you don't know what Mailchimp is, it's an email service you can use for newsletters, offers. I actually use it to send out course notifications when I create a new course. Basically how this will work is this form will submit to our Node and Express server, and then we'll make a request to the API with all the data, with the API key, and sign the user up for a list. So if we go to the Mailchimp dashboard, and Mailchimp is free up to a certain number of subscribers. So you create an account, it's free, no credit card needed. Once you hit, I think, like 2,000 subscribers, it'll ask you if you want to create a premium account, if you want more, if you want to be able to accept more subscribers. So just go ahead and log in, and you just want to create a list. So if we go to lists, you'll see I have two lists here, my main one and then a test one that just has 3 fake subscribers just from doing testing and stuff like that. If I click on that, you'll see the emails here. So what I'm going to do is submit this form. Let's just create a fake user. We'll say Mary Thompson. Email, we'll say mary@gmail.com, and sign up. So what happens here is it makes a request to our server, our Node server, and then we make a request to the API. If it gives us a status of 200, meaning everything's okay, then we redirect to this success page. Okay, and we can go back if we want. Now, if I go over to Mailchimp and I reload my list, you'll see we have mary@gmail.com. Okay, so it's as easy as that. Now, there can be a delay with this web GUI. There's been times where it's taken 1 or 2 minutes for the email to actually show up here, and it seems to be a global issue. I've done some research and found some Stack Overflow posts where people were having the same problem. So there may be a little delay. So don't be alarmed if you don't see it right away. All right, so let's get started here. I'm going to jump into VS Code, and I just have an empty folder called Mailchimp Newsletter. And we are using Node, so we need to create what's called a package.json file. So we do that with npm init. Make sure you have Node.js installed. If you don't, just go to nodejs.org, download it, install it, and you'll get Node along with npm, which is the Node package manager. So we're just going to initialize a package.json file with npm init. I'm just going to go through this real quick. So description, we'll say simple newsletter app using Mailchimp, and entry point is going to be app.js, and we can go through this. Author, you can put your own name if you want. License, I'm going to do MIT. All right, so that generates a package.json file that looks like this. Now what we want to do is install a couple dependencies. So we are using Express for our web server or our web framework. So let's say npm install Express, and then we're going to have to make requests to the Mailchimp server or to interact with the API. So we're also going to install something called request, and then we're also going to install body-parser so that we can parse the form data. All right, so we'll install those things, and those will get added as dependencies in our package.json file, as you can see right here. Now, I'm also going to install something called NodeMon so that we don't have to keep restarting our server when we make changes. But I want to install that as a dev dependency, so I'm going to add a -D and then NodeMon. And that'll get added as a development dependency, as you can see right here. Now, the last thing I want to do in this package.json file is create a couple scripts. So one is going to be our start script, so we're going to change that to start, and this is just going to run the file with Node.js, so it's going to be Node app or Node app.js. And then we also want a dev script, which is going to run NodeMon, so that'll constantly watch the application. So we'll say NodeMon app, like that. Okay, and then that's it. We'll save this file and we can close it up. And let's make this a little smaller. And now what we want to do is create our app.js file, which is basically our main entry point. So let's create a file called app.js. And from here, we want to bring in all the stuff that we want to bring in, which is going to be Express. So we want to require Express. Okay, we also want to bring in, actually, let's bring in request, and let's bring in body parser. And we're also going to bring in our path module, which is just a core Node.js module just to deal with file paths. So we want to bring that stuff in, and then of course we need to initialize our Express app. So we're going to create a variable called app and set that to Express. Okay, we want to then take that app object and we want to call listen, which is going to start our server. It's going to take in a port. I'm actually going to put our port into a variable here. So we'll say const port equals, and we're going to use process.env.port. Okay, we may even deploy this to Heroku, I'm not sure yet. And we'll say, or if it's local, then we want to just run it on port 5000. Okay, and then in here we just want to put the port variable, and then let's just do a shortcut for an arrow function, and we'll say console log, let's say server started on, and then we'll put in a port variable using this variable syntax. And if you're going to use this syntax, make sure you use backticks here. Okay, this is ES6 syntax. All right, so we should at least be able to start the server. Let's save this and let's go down here. And remember, we created the dev script, the npm script called dev. So we should be able to do npm run dev, and that will start up NodeMon. Looks like we got an error here, and that's because this should be uppercase, because that's what I used here. Let's do that again. And server started on 5000. Now, if I go to localhost port 5000, we're going to get cannot get slash because we don't have a route for a slash. Now, basically, what I want to do here is I want to have a static folder where we can just have HTML files and we can just serve just HTML files, like you know, the newsletter page, the success page. We're also going to have a fail page. So to do that, let's jump back into Express and let's create a static folder, or declare a static folder. Okay, and the way that we do that is we just say app.use, and we want to do express.static, and in here we're just going to say path.join, and we're going to say we want to look in the current directory, which is _dir name, and then we want to look in the public folder. So basically we're going to create a folder called public, and that's going to be our static folder where we can just create HTML files and serve them. So let's save that and let's create a new folder called public. And inside here, let's create a file called index.html. And I'm just going to use Emmet here and do !tab just to create a basic layout. And for the title, let's say newsletter sign up, and then in the body let's just put an h1 and let's just say hello and save. Now, since this is called index.html and it's in our static folder, which is our public folder, this should actually load when we hit the root of our server. So let's reload, and there we go, we get hello. Okay, so if we create our other files in public that we want, which is success.html, and let's also create fail.html, and I'm just going to copy what we have in the index and paste that in success, and we'll just say success. We're going to change this later. I just want to make sure that these pages load, and then we'll just say fail. So now if we go back to our browser, and if we were to go to /success.html, you'll see the success. And if we go to fail.html, we see fail. Okay, so our static folder is serving our HTML. All right, and you don't have to do it this way. If you want to create a separate route for each HTML page and just use res.sendFile, you can do that. You know, you could use like a template engine if you wanted to. You could use EJS or handlebars, but I don't want to really get into that. I just want to keep this simple. So let's now start to create our form. So I want to use Bootstrap, but I want to customize it a little bit. So what I like to do is use something called Bootswatch, which are basically just customized Bootstrap files, Bootstrap CSS files. And we're going to use, which one did I use actually? I forget. I use Slate. So this one right here, Slate. If you like the look of some of the other ones, you want to use those, that's fine. I'm just going to click on the download button, and it's just going to give us the entire file. So you could copy this and use it locally, but I'm just going to grab the URL here just to make it simple. So we're going to grab that and go back to VS Code and just put in a link tag here and paste in that link. Now we're also going to be using some fonts. So we want to go to fontawesome.com and go to, would they change this up? It looks different. Start using free, and then just grab this link tag as well and put that right in here. All right, we're going to need these in the other pages as well, so we might as well just copy those and put that in the success. And I'm using the prettier extension for VS Code. That's why when I save, it kind of changed it up a little bit to make it more readable. Not something you need, but I like it. All right, so now if we were to go to our server and reload, you'll see that it's using Bootstrap. It's also using that Slate theme. All right, so let's jump back into our index.html, and instead of typing all the stuff out, the form, I'm going to just paste it in and go over it real quick. So let's paste over this h1 here, and I'm just going to save this and go over it. So we're using Bootstrap, so we have a lot of Bootstrap classes like the container. Then we have a section with the class of row because I want to use the grid system. The MT5 is just margin top. It's just going to push it down. We want to align everything to the center. And then we just have one 6-column div, and we want it in the middle, so we use the mAuto class. And then we just have this newspaper icon from Font Awesome. We have an H1. We have a paragraph with the class of lead, and then we have our form. Now notice our form, the method is post. We want this to be a post request to our server, and the endpoint is going to be /signup. Okay, so we have to handle that route on our server. And then as far as the fields go, we just have a first name. Okay, you see name of first name. That's how we can grab it on the server. Then we have last name, and then we have email, and then we just have a submit button. So pretty simple. I didn't want to just take the time and to type all that out because it's very simple. So let's save this and take a quick look. So we'll reload, and there's our newsletter sign up form. All right, so now we need to handle the submit. So let's go to our app.js. And remember, it's making a post request to /signup. So that's what we need to handle. So we'll go right here. Let's say signup route. We're going to do app.post because it's a post request we're handling. /signup. And then let's put a function. You can either put a function like that, or you can do an arrow function, which is what I'm going to do. And we want to put in request response as our parameters, and in here we want to get the data that's submitted in the form. Now to do that, we're going to use body parser, which we already brought in, but it takes one line of middleware if we want to accept form data. So let's go right here and just say body parser middleware, and that's going to be app.use body parser dot URL encoded, and we want to say extended and set that to true. Okay, so that's the only line we need for our middleware. And now what should happen is we should be able to use request.body to get that data. So let's try this out by just console logging request.body, and then we just want to do some kind of return. I'm just going to do res.send hello. So it'll just display hello in the browser, but what we want to pay attention to is what's logged in the console down here. So let's save this and let's submit the form. So I'll just say Brad, and just do Brad@gmail, and let's go ahead and sign up. So it just shows us hello in the browser, but we want to go back to VS Code and look in the console and notice that we have an object with all of our fields and our data. Okay, so we know that we're now getting that form data. Now I want each one of these in their own variable. So the way that we can do this, an easy way to do this, is by using destructuring. So we'll just say const and then open some curly braces, and we can basically pull the variables out. So let's take first name and last name and email, and we'll pull that out of request.body. So now we have these as single variables. Now the next thing we want to do is I just want to validate. I want to make sure that they don't send the form with nothing in it, which is just very simple validation. If you want to extend it further than that, feel free. But I'm just going to do a simple if statement here. Let's put a comment. We'll just say make sure fields are filled. And we can do that by just saying if not first name or not last name or not email, then what do we want to do? We have this fail.html page. I just want to redirect them to that. So I'm going to do res.redirect. And let's just pass in here. We want to go to our static folder and go to fail.html. And we just want to return here, or else we're going to get some header message. Our header's already sent. So let's try that out. Let's save it, and let's go back to our form at localhost 5000. And let's try to submit without putting any data. And we get fail. Okay, and we're going to change that fail page up in a little bit. But now if we were to fill this out and sign up, you'll see it just does nothing. So let's stop that. Okay, so let's move on. Now we're going to make a request to the Mailchimp API, and we're doing that with the request module. Okay, so we want to say request, and basically this request here, we just want to say request. This is going to take in a couple things. It's going to take in some options, and then it's going to take in a function, and we're going to use an arrow here. Okay, and this function here is going to take an error if there is one, also response and body. Okay, and make sure you don't call this res, because it's gonna mess up because of this res right here. So make sure you call that something different, like response. Now the options, let's say const options is going to be an object, and this is where it's going to take in the URL that we're sending the request to. It's going to take in the method. We need to put our API key in here and the authorization header, stuff like that. So first thing is going to be the URL that we're making the request to, which is going to be the Mailchimp API. And I just want to show you something real quick. So if we go to developer.mailchimp.com and go to let's do this and then get started, and we go to before you start, it's going to give us the URL that we need to use, which is this right here. And notice that there's this DC. This is the data center that we need to put into the URL. So it's the datacenter.api.mailchimp.com version 3.0, and then we do / whatever list, and I'll show you that in a second. But this data center right here, you're going to want to fill that in with whatever data center your account is using. So if we go back to my account and we look in the URL, you'll see this US14. So your data center is going to be like US 1, 2, 3. It goes up to, I don't even know what it goes up to, but it's going to be US and then a number like this. Okay, so mine is US 14, so that's what I want to use in my URL. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this and head back to VS Code and paste that in. Now, this is just basically the root URL. We need to make a request to /lists/ and then the list ID. Okay, now if I go back to the documentation and we go to, let's see, API reference, and this gives you all the different Mailchimp endpoints for all types of stuff. You have stuff for automation, batch operations, webhooks, campaigns, conversations, all types of stuff. But what we want is lists. So I'm going to keep going down here, and you'll see lists. And the specific endpoint we want to look at is list/list ID, and we want the post request. Because if we look at the function that it does, it will batch subscribe or unsubscribe list members. That's exactly what we want to do. So to get this list ID, you need to go back to your lists. Actually, let's go right here, lists, and then we're going to hit settings. And if we go down all the way, you'll see this unique ID for whatever list you created. So we need that. Okay, it's not the ID that's in the URL here. Okay, you don't want that. You want this right here. So we're going to grab that and just put that right in there. And that's our ID. So that's the actual URL we want to make a request to. The next option here is going to be the method we want to use, which is going to be a post request. All right, now if we try it now, it's going to give us a 401 error back, which is an unauthorized, because we haven't implemented our API key yet. And the way that we do that is we send it in the authorization header. So we want to put a value of headers here, okay? And headers is actually an object, and you can send whatever headers you want. We want to send an authorization header, okay? And then what I'm going to do, let's just put some quotes here, and then I'm going to go back to Mailchimp, and we need our API key. So I'm going to go here, and then account, and extras, API keys, and I'm going to grab, I can grab either of these, but let's just do this one. So I'm going to copy that API key, and I'm going to delete these after, so don't bother trying these. And we want to put this in here. Now, the way that the authorization works is it has just a string before the API key. Like usually if you use JSON Web Tokens, you'll see like JWT space and then the token, or bearer, you'll see like bearer tokens. But we're just going to put auth and then space and then paste in the key. Okay, notice the key also has my data center in it. So once we do that, the last thing we need is our data, right? It needs to actually know what email, what first name, last name, stuff like that. So it's going to take in a body value, and we're going to put in post data, which we haven't created yet. We actually have to set that up. Okay, so before we do anything, let's create this data. So I'm going to go up here, and I'm going to say construct request data, meaning the data we send with the request. So we're going to put this in a variable called data. Okay. Now there's a very, very specific way we need to structure this. So let's head over back to the documentation, and let's click on this this endpoint right here. Now, as far as path parameters, it takes the list ID. We've already done that. That's taken care of. But let's look at the body parameters. So the body takes in a required field of members, which is an array. Okay. Now this members is an array object representing an email address and the subscription status. Okay. And if we scroll down here, we can see an example of what that looks like. So it's an object with a members array, and inside that members array, we have an object with the email address, and then we have a status of either subscribed or unsubscribed, because you can also use this endpoint to unsubscribe users. And and maybe that's something you can take this tutorial further and add an unsubscribe option. But we need this. We need to set it up like this. Now notice you don't see first name and last name in this here. That's because first name and last name are what are called merge fields. Okay. Now if we go back to our list, let's go to test list, and we go to settings, and you'll see list fields and merge tags. If I click that, you'll see that we have first name, email address, and last name. Okay, so these are what are called merge fields, which are basically basically like extra data. And what's cool about Mailchimp is you can add as many fields as you want. If you want to put hobbies or something like that, you can do that, and you can set them to be required or not. So to use first name and last name, we need to look at the tag, which is by default F name and L name. Okay, and you can change these if you want, but just remember F name and L name. Okay, so now with what we just looked at, let's construct our data. So it's going to be an object, and it's going to have a members array. Okay, so an array is square braces or brackets, and members is going to have an object with email address. Okay, now our email address is going to be the email from the form, which we set up here. Variable is right here. We pulled it out of the body. And we also want a status, and the status is going to be a string of subscribed. Okay, now for the merge fields, that's actually going to be a new object called merge_fields. And for merge fields, we want to use F name, because that's the tag that's being used, and we'll set that to the first name variable that's sent in by the form. And then we want to do L name, which is our last name that's sent in by the form. So that's how we want to construct our data. Now, we can't send it as an object like this. It has to actually be a string. So what we're going to do is turn it into a string with a method called json.stringify. So we're going to create a new variable called postData, and we're going to set it to json.stringify, and we're just going to pass in data. Okay, and then that's why I have postData right here. We want to send the stringified version of this data object. Okay, and it should be able to accept that and process it and add to the list. All right, now inside this request right here, or inside the callback function or the arrow function, we want to do a couple things. We want to first check for an error. Okay, so if there's an error, then what I want to do is redirect to the fail page. So we'll say res.redirect to fail.html, else. Okay, else meaning that there's no error, but we want to check for the status code, the response. And we do that by saying, let's do if response. Okay, so response is coming from here, from this parameter, and it has a property called status code, and we want to check to make sure that that's 200, meaning everything is okay. If it is, then we want to redirect to the success. Oops. We want to redirect to /success.html. Else, then we want to, I'll just copy this. We want to redirect to fail. Okay, and that's it. So just to reiterate, when we submit the HTML form, it goes to this route, sign up. We get all the form data here into variables. We check to make sure that it's actually filled out. We construct our data as the API tells us with the members array, the merge fields, and all that. And then we stringify it. Okay, we turn it into a string. We set all of our options, including, this is one thing I forgot to do, is our data center. So this should be US 14 for me. Yours may be different. Okay, so we have our URL with our data center and the list ID. Let me just make sure it's lists and not list. Let's see, let's go to the docs and yep, so it is lists. Okay, so we make a post request to list/list ID. Headers, we have our API key inside the header. And then we have the post data that we created up here inside the body. And then finally, we pass those options into our request. And then we have a callback to handle the response. We check for an error. If there is one, we show the fail page. If there's not, we still need to check the response code, make sure it's 200. And then if it is, we redirect to the success. If it's not, then we redirect to fail. Okay, so ultimately that's what's going on here. So let's make sure that this is saved. And I think we're ready to try it out. So I'm going to head back over to Chrome. And let's see, let's go into our list. Test list. So right now we have 4 subscribers in here, Paul, Tom, and Mary. So let's go back and I'm just going to reload this and let's try it out. So we'll do like, let's say Kevin Johnson, Kevin at Gmail. All right, so let's try this out. Sign up. And we takes us to our success page, which will change in a minute. But let's go back to our Mailchimp dashboard here and reload. And there he is, Kevin at Gmail. So this is now working. So the last thing we need to do is just make the success page look better. So let's go to success HTML. And what I'm going to do is just paste this in. It's not much markup at all. I'm just going to replace the H1. Basically, it's set up the same way as the index. We have a container, we have a section with the row, we have our 6-column div, we have a thumbs up icon, an H1, and a paragraph, and then we just have a back button that goes to slash. So let's save that, and then let's change up the fail page, okay, which is basically set up the same way, it's just different content. So I'm going to paste this in, and same thing, we just have an X icon. It's FA times octagon. Actually, we should have the 2x FA dash 2x. And it just says sorry and it says something went wrong. That's our fail page. So let's go back and let's try it one more time. So if I submit with nothing, we get the sorry. If I submit, let's say Jerry, Wilson, and sign up. Success. So now we have a much better looking success page. We can go back if we want, and let's go back to our dashboard here and reload. And Jerry at Gmail. All right, so we've completed our project. And if you wanted to deploy this to Heroku or somewhere else, it should be pretty simple. It's a very simple application. Basically we just have our public folder where we serve our HTML. We have an endpoint for sign up, and then we interact with the Mailchimp API. So hopefully you enjoyed this. If you did, please leave a like. If you want to support this channel directly, I do have a Patreon account, and that link is in the description, as well as all my social media. So thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. Hey guys, one of the best, if not the best resource I can refer you to for starting a freelance business is at studywebdevelopment.com/freelancing. The creator Kyle shared it with me, and I can personally vouch that this bundle is well worth it. You get a 130-page guide to freelancing, and it comes with things like invoice templates, client proposals, HTML and CSS templates, a portfolio website, access to a private Facebook community, and much more. So use the code BRAD25 to get 25% off today.